Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of One More Thing Before I Go, the podcast that celebrates the extraordinary lives of everyday people. I'm your host, Anthony Anderson, and we're continuing our series on the Enneagram. I get a lot of questions asking, okay, if you're not wanting me to take a test, how in the world am I supposed to find my type? Do I have to read all these books? Some of them look really daunting. Some of them are hundreds and hundreds of pages long. How in the world do I find my type in a short amount of time? The quick and dirty answer is it's supposed to take time. You're supposed to do a lot of soul searching. You're supposed to do a lot of work to try to figure this thing out. It's not an immediate thing. The longer answer is there's a lot of tools that you can use along the way to help you. So today we're going to talk about how there are not just one triad or one group of triads. There's actually at least four. And so we're going to break down all four of these different sets of triads and hope that by the end of it, you can start to triangulate the ones that seem to sound the most like you and the ones that you seem to be drawn to the most. And hopefully by the end, you'll have maybe one or two that you seem to be a little bit more settled on. Buckle up, we're going to take a deep dive. This is something that a lot of Enneagram podcasts and other types of folk aren't going to really dig into. So be prepared. This episode of One More Thing Before I Go is sponsored by Anchor.fm. When I first had the idea of making the show, my primary obstacle was deciding which platform to use for my recording, hosting, and distribution. Anchor made it so easy because they do all three things and much, much more. It's free. They have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will even distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more platforms. You can make money from your podcast, whether you have 2 listeners or 2,000. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. All you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started today. Okay. So I get a lot of questions sometimes about how I harp on the fact that Enneagram tests aren't very accurate. And if you missed that, the short version of this is that it's really hard for a test to show anything other than behavior. And so what you're testing is what you're doing versus what the Enneagram is really about, which is what's going on inside your heart. What's your motivations? What are the things that are compelling you to do what it is that you do? So I get questions a lot asking, how in the world am I supposed to piece together all these things? How am I supposed to figure this out? I don't have time to read every single entry about every single type in order to figure out which number I am. Is there a shorthand version of this? To which I reply, sort of. The way that you can approach this without going through tons and tons of other things is by looking into additional triads. That's right. The triads that we've talked about before is one of at least 4 different types of triads that you can work with within the Enneagram. Most people are aware of the first one, which is also known as your core intelligences. That's the gut or the instinctive triad that struggles with anger. There's the heart or the feeling triad that struggles with shame. And there's the head or thinking triad that struggles with fear. We talked about that in an earlier episode, so we're not going to go into too much detail with those. There's 3 others that we can tackle, and then if we do a little bit of triangulating and say, okay, well, I feel like I'm in the heart triad, I feel like I take this stance, I'm in this harmonic group, and I relate to objects and people in this particular way. There's possibly some overlap there. Let me at least start with a handful of these numbers and look into those a little bit more in depth. It's not going to guarantee that you're going to get the most accurate results, but it's going to narrow down so you don't have to necessarily read up on all 9 types. You can maybe read on 2 or 3 or 4 or something, depending on how widely varied you are across the board. So let's tackle some of those and see if we can help hone in. If you're listening at home, if you're struggling with, I have a number, I've taken a test, and I'm not really sure if it's accurate, if you want to verify the number that you think that you are, or if you're just starting out and this is your first time really hearing about this and you haven't even taken the steps of reading through any of the types, this is a good starting point. The most well-known of the 3 new triads that we're going to talk about is known as the Hornevian grouping, because there's a lady named Karen Horney who years ago, prior to the Enneagram even becoming a big thing, had started working on this in psychological development and developed these 3 typings of her own. And they seem to fall in pretty well with the way that the Enneagram typing system works. And if you'll notice as we go through this, these particular sets will fall in line with the triads we've already talked about in a way so there's only one of each type that overlaps with the previous grouping. So for example, one of the types that we're going to talk about includes the 3, the 7, and the 8. Well, if you know how the core intellect triads work, the 8 is part of the gut triad, the 3 is part of the heart triad, the 7 is part of the head triad. And so all 3 of these triangulations will actually fall into the same types of patterns. So the more common term for the Hornevian groups is your stance. So while the other triad that we talked about show what you want, the stances show how each number actually achieves what it is that they want. It's a key difference, but it's important. And then when you overlay them, then you'll find there's a 1-to-1 correlation. So really, if you're lucky, you may land on a particular number between figuring out your triad and figuring out your stance, and you may have one number to work with. We'll see how this goes. The first of the 3 groupings is the type that I was just talking about, the 3s, the 7s, and the 8s. They're known as the assertives. Some people refer to this stance as aggressive, but if you talk to most 3s, 7s, and 8s, aggressive sounds too negative. Assertive makes a lot more sense. Assertives are known for moving against people instead of complying with them or pulling away from people in order to get what they want. They're the type that's going to walk into a room and survey the room and say, what can I actually get out of the room? What can the room and the people in the room give me? They're going to usually take charge, take action, and they're going to demand results. So they're going to appear as independent and outwardly at least confident. For the 3s, they are assertive because they're always being driven toward finding acceptance and figuring out their own identity. The 7s are going to be assertive because they're looking for security and support. So they're going to try to demand those things from the world around them and the people around them. And the 8s are going to basically assert themselves in order to gain control of a situation. And sometimes they'll come off as extremely aggressive because the 8s don't want to give up control for fear of betrayal. So you have the assertive types, the 3s, the 7s, and the 8s. Next, we have the 1s, the 2s, and the 6s. And again, the 1 is part of the gut triad, the 2 is part of the heart triad, the 6 is part of the head triad. So each of the 3 intelligences are represented once more. This is known as the compliant stance. Compliants tend to move toward people instead of asserting themselves or moving away from people to get what they want. They're looking to follow the rules, they want to serve and help other people, and they feel like they need to, instead of demand results like the assertive types, they need to earn what they're looking for. The compliant types are also known as the dependent types. They're the types that are going to walk into that same room that the assertive types went into and said, what can I get from the room and what can I get from the people in the room? But the dependents are going to look at the same room, look at the same people, and say, what does the room need from me? What do the people in the room need from me? For the 1s, they do that because they want to gain control. They want to have autonomy and not have people looking over their own shoulders. So they're wanting to follow the rules or wanting to do what's right in hopes that everybody just kind of leaves them alone and gets off their back. The 2s are the epitome of the helper type, and so they're trying to get what they want by jumping in and helping everybody at every turn. Please love me because I'm going to do things for you. And the 6s are looking for safety and security, and so they're trying to become a part of a larger group that they identify with somebody who upholds their belief systems in the hopes that there's strength in numbers. And so they're going to jump in and just take part of whatever is going on in the hopes that they can find more security in that way. And then lastly, we have the withdrawing type. That would be the 9s, which are part of the gut triad, the 4s, who are part of the heart triad, and the 5s, who are part of the head triad. 9s, 4s, and 5s. The withdrawing type's going to look into that same room that the assertives went into, that the compliance went into. They're going to look into that room and say, how can I pull away from all the people in order to achieve the things that I want? Withdrawing people tend to move away and retreat physically or mentally, possibly both, in order to get what they want, get what they need. So their focus is on their inner selves, and I can accomplish what I need without the help and without the assistance of other people. For the 4s, they're looking for identity, they're looking for acceptance, and so they're going to withdraw a lot because they don't feel like they have anything in common with the other people around them. So they're going to find their identity within themselves. For the 5s, looking for safety and security, social situations are just awkward for 5s, so they sometimes feel out of place and prefer to kind of pull away and just watch the social engagements of other people. That gives them the security that they're looking for. And the 9s are looking for control, but they do it in a way that disengages if they feel threatened at all. And sometimes the threat comes from within, and sometimes the threat comes from just being around people. I'm not really sure what's going to play out in this situation. And so they tend to retreat in order to protect themselves, protect their loved ones, and avoid conflict. The interesting thing with 9s is that while the 4s and the 5s tend to often physically withdraw, and then the 5s potentially also mentally withdraw, the 9s will often be very physically present, but they will mentally withdraw and not be there at all. They're in their own little safe, happy place, their fortress of solitude, and it looks like they're right in their room with everybody else, maybe right in the middle of everything, but they're not fully engaged. Okay, so we have one triad that helps us figure out what it is specifically that we're wanting. We have one triad that is designed to help us try to figure out how it is that we get those things that we want. And now we'll introduce a new group called the harmonic groups that is a look at how do we react when we don't get the things that we want. It's an organization to discuss the way that our personality defends against loss and disappointment. What is our coping mechanism at that point? So the first group is the 9, the 2, and the 7. And you'll notice again that you have one from each of the 3 instinctive triads. 9 is the gut, 2 is the heart, 7 is the head. And this group is known as the positive outlook group. These types are going to try to put a positive spin on conflict, negative feelings, and they're usually looking for ways to counteract anything bad that's going on with something good. The 2s, because their primary desire is to feel loved, their thing is to approach it, well, I can't solve my problem, let me help you with your problem. And so they'll end up kind of reshifting the perspective and turning away from themselves, focusing on other people. The 7, because they want to be satisfied, they want to be content. If anything goes wrong, they'll figure out a way to focus on the fun and say, well, that may be a problem, but it doesn't affect me. It doesn't apply to me, so it's not a big deal, and just kind of brush it off. And the 9s, because they want to obtain peace and tranquility and this inner zen, then they will just deny that there's a problem at all. There's no conflict here. That's not me. A conflict is not a thing that I do. So what the 2 is ultimately doing is they're avoiding feelings of disappointment, feelings of anger, and even avoiding filling their own needs. And so they end up neglecting themselves, neglecting their own needs in an effort to help other people. The 7, because they want to avoid pain and discomfort, and maybe seeing or acknowledging how what they do actually causes other people pain, then even if it's not their problem, other people's problems annoy them. And so they kind of run away to take care of themselves, take care of their own needs, and figure out ways to make themselves happy again. The 9s, because they're avoiding conflict, they avoid negative qualities in other people and anything that may rock the boat, including their own development or lack thereof. So they'll actually avoid personal development if it means that there's going to cause conflict in some capacity. And so then they do that because they don't want to be overwhelmed. And usually facing other people's problems is even more overwhelming than facing their own problems. And so they just don't want to acknowledge that there is a problem ever. The next grouping we have is the competency group. This is the 1 from the gut triad, the 3 from the heart triad, and the 5 from the head triad. And like the name implies, if something goes wrong, they're attempting to fix it. So for the 1, the approach is, I've got to get it right, because the 1s are all focused on good and evil, right and wrong, and so they have to have the right answer because they're driven by this desire to be good, to have integrity, to maintain integrity. So the 1s just want to figure it out. I want to figure out what went wrong, how to make things better, how to improve it, so the next time maybe it doesn't go as poorly, or for the next time it doesn't go wrong at all. For the 3, their drive is for feeling valuable, feeling worthy. They want to achieve something because they feel like they need to prove their worth to people around them, and so achievement is their drive. And so they're going to work tirelessly to solve the problem. They're going to use logic, but they're willing to kind of bend the rules, twist the rules if they don't like the way that the rules work. And they're really going to try to focus on fixing the issue rather than addressing their emotional needs because of things going poorly. And then the 5s, they are driven by this idea that they need to be capable, they need to be competent, and so if something goes wrong, then they say, give me time, let me analyze this, let me figure out what happened, because this wasn't supposed to play out this way. So 5s are going to completely remove their emotions from the equation and just go into super analysis mode to solve the problem. If it means they have to become an expert in a situation, an expert on the subject matter that they weren't already, in order to make sure that they can prove themselves competent so that things don't go wrong again, that's likely what they'll do. And 5s are not opposed to just completely breaking the rules in order to figure out how to actually achieve the outcome they're looking for. So again, you have the 1 that wants to be right, wants to improve themselves while following the rules. You have the 3 who wants to achieve goals and prove that they're capable and competent so that everybody else can approve of them. And the 5 who needs to become the expert to maintain a clear head and remain objective through the entire situation. Which then brings us to our last group of all of these harmonic types, and this is the reactive group. So we have the 4 from the heart triad, the 6 from the head triad, and the 8 from the gut triad. Again, these are the reactive types. This is the group that's going to usually have very strong opinions, very strong emotions. Even if they're not an overly emotional type, they're not necessarily in the heart triad. When things go wrong, you're going to experience those emotions whether you want to or not. For the fours, they're hoping to find their identity while they're dealing with the uncomfortability of the situation. And so fours want people to empathize with them. And so they'll go out of their way, let me tell you how this makes me feel. And so they're not hiding their feelings at all. They're actually hoping that someone can identify with their pain and maybe take that pain away from them. The sixes, because they're looking for security, they're looking for support, they're looking around for anybody else to say, is anybody as freaked out as I am about this? Is anybody else experiencing the same anxiety, the same emotions that I am? Sixes are going to put their guard up, and some of them will even fall back and look for the support of other people. Maybe this person can accomplish the goal, but I clearly can't. I can't be trusted in this situation, so maybe someone else can handle it when I can't. And then the eights are just going to be outright open, brash, boisterous, and let you know how mad they are about all this. There's injustice in the world. This person was wrong. This person was wrong. And let me tell you all about it, because they want to, if they've lost control, things aren't going well, they need to do whatever they can to regain control of the situation. They're going to try to take the lead if people are uncomfortable. If things are going awkwardly, eights are going to jump in and just take charge in order to right the ship, because ultimately they're looking for a way to control the outcome so bad things don't happen again. So the fours are looking for someone to actually see them for who they are, to understand them, support them, and so they'll keep those people close and they'll keep everyone else at bay. The sixes are looking for independence. They're looking for people to support their beliefs and their feelings, and so they're going to bond to those groups and at the same time try to figure out how to maintain their own independence, which is a hard balance for them. And the eights are looking primarily for independence. They want to be their own person. I don't want to have to rely on anyone, and so they're going to put up a lot of solid defenses around them to protect against anybody who could have hurt them, because again, if something goes wrong in an eights world, it's somebody else's fault, so everybody else is to blame. So that's the reactive group, we have the competency group, and we have the positive outlook group. Between those three, it helps us identify what happens when we don't get what we want. That's the harmonic group. And then the final triad that we don't hear a lot about, but I like talking about it. I think it's of interest to me. Of course, being a 5, everything is of interest to me and everything's worth studying. So this may not be anything of interest to anybody but me, and I'll be talking to myself, but I'll have fun doing it. The last type that we want to talk about is something called object relations. And it's a weird terminology, but basically the idea is when you're trying to attain something or reach out to someone of value, something or someone of importance, what is your expectation? How do you approach it? First, we have the attachment group. That's the 3, the 6, and the 9. Again, 1 per core intelligence triad. We'll find that plays out for all these again. This is the attachment group. People with the attachment, object relation, or people relation tend to feel like that they're content with what's going on because they've wholeheartedly started clinging to something or someone in their life. So they feel deeply attached to something in their life that they see is good. For the 3s, they're adapting their self-image in order to meet the expectations and values of other people. That's how they're going to find their contentment. They are looking to receive attention, validation from others, and so their sense of self is based on their attachment to their self-image, and their self-image hopefully is that of them being successful and valuable to the community in some way. The sixes, instead of adapting self-image, they're adapting their belief system so that it matches up with a particular authority figure or a authority system, whether that's a political party, it could be a religious group, it could be a smaller grouping that they just hang on to for various purposes. Sixes doubt their ability to cope with the world, and so they're looking for security and safety through other people and other systems. And so their sense of self is this idea that I have to attach or associate to important people in my life and to groups in my life and be loyal to them in order to find the contentment I'm looking for. And then the nines are adapting, they're merging with the people around them, and so their own opinions, their own desires are the things that are changing in order to match the people around them. Nines want peace, so they're willing to suppress their own opinions and their own wishes and wants and just go along with others so they can attain the harmony that they're looking for. So nines have their sense of self on the idea and the attachment to the fact that what I want is peace. I'm attached to this idea of peace, and I'm willing to give up everything else, no matter what the cost, in order to obtain it. The next grouping is the 1, the 4, and the 7. This is the frustration group. They feel like they know what it is that's going to make them happy, but they also feel like they almost never actually have that. And so they're pursuing those things that they feel like is going to make them happy. Once they obtain it, they tend to become disappointed and disillusioned with that thing because it didn't actually permanently meet their goal of happiness that they were looking for. So they become frustrated and they start their search all over again for the next thing that they feel like, well, maybe this will finally make me happy. And so their sense of self is based on searching for a particular ideal. So for the ones, the ideal for them is autonomy. That's what they ultimately are looking for. So they're constantly looking for perfection and self-control. They're focusing on what's wrong and what's out of place in a situation, and they become frustrated when they see things or people that don't live up to their standards, and they feel obligated, I have to fix it, I have to improve it. So their sense of self is based on looking for autonomy, and that's their ideal. The 4s are looking for the ideal attention. There's got to be someone out there who completely understands me, who completely appreciates me. It's the Disney princess idea of someday my prince will come, and then everything will be perfect. My life will be happily ever after. Unfortunately, if we're honest with ourselves, we look at most of those Disney movies and those stories and those fairy tales. If you look 2, 6, 12 months down the road, that happily ever after is most likely not going to be as happy as we are led to believe. The 4s are focused on what's missing in themselves and what's missing in others. They feel like they have a hole inside themselves, and there's clearly got to be a hole in someone else that I can fill. So despite their hoping for an ideal partner, every person that they find, they're spotting the flaws in them as well. And so this is not the perfect person. This is not the person who's going to meet my needs and fulfill my ideal for that prince that was promised to me. And so it's not quite what they're looking for, and so they move on frustrated. They're looking for attention, and they're looking for validation from others, but they feel like they have to play hard to get. They feel like they have to be different in order to attain the thing that everybody else seems to, in their mind, get for free or comes easily to them. And so usually their strategy for attention is to pull away, to, like I said, to be hard to get. And so that doesn't really work very often. And so then they get frustrated. Well, nobody wants me. Nobody is coming after me. Maybe I'm more broken than I even gave myself credit for. And so it makes it really hard for them to maintain their sense of self. And then the 7s are searching for not autonomy and not attention. They're looking for the ideal security and contentment. And so for the 7s, their focus is on how much fun they're not having. Even in the best of situations where everyone else is having a blast, the seven's looking around and saying, ugh, it's not quite as good as I was hoping it would be. It's not quite as fun. And so they're already in the middle of amazing situations, jumping to new opportunities in their mind and playing this out. Either the next time we do this, let's do it differently, or, man, I'm going to plan a new party because this party's lame. And so they're constantly in their mind playing out all these things that perceptively is amazing, but it never plays out that way. And so they're constantly frustrated with the situation of what is, and so they're always looking for security in the future because they can't find the security and safety they're looking for in the present. And so their sense of self is based on searching and never finding. They can never actually be satisfied or happy with the experience, so they're constantly looking for something bigger and better right around the corner. Which leaves us with the last set of three, the 2s, the 5s, and the 8s. And these are known as the rejection group. They feel like they've been rejected by others, that other people don't care about my own needs, so I should probably reject my own needs as well and focus on other things. Their relationships usually have issues. Either I don't want to be touched, I don't want to be nurtured, leave me alone, let me take care of you perhaps, but you don't need to take care of me, that type of thing. And it's all built around this idea of feeling that like they've been rejected or consistently being rejected. A lot of times they feel like maybe I only have one thing to offer to the world. And so I'm just going to focus on that and keep on giving that to people because nobody can reject this part of me. And so their sense of self is based on proving that rejection wrong or countering it. So, they offer something that can't be rejected. For the 2s, they're rejecting their own needs, their own negative thoughts, their own emotions, and they're giving the only gift they feel like they have left, which is their heart. So 2s will focus on the needs of others. They're going to try to care for people, nurture them. And what they're trying to do is set their own needs aside, take care of other people in the hopes that someone will love them because of what they do. Prove that they're worth loving by seeing how much love they have for other people. For the 5s, they're going to reject and minimize their needs, specifically the physical and the emotional, and they feel like the only gift they have left to offer is their head. And so they're going to provide unique insight and intelligence and expertise to other people, hoping that somebody will finally appreciate them and validate them for the knowledge that they have. So they're going to build up expertise. They're going to hope to become important enough so that maybe finally I won't be rejected any further than I already have been. So 5s are not going to focus on emotional needs. They're going to try to not need other people. I can be myself. I can be independent, and I don't even need love. What I need is for you to validate that my ideas are good and not reject them. 5s believe that their lack of emotion will somehow block out and shield the pain of further rejection. As a 5, I can tell you firsthand, it doesn't work, but we try anyway. And then the 8s. 8s reject their own needs, specifically emotional and a little bit more intellectual. And the only gift that they feel like they have to prevent being rejected again is their sheer strength and willpower. They believe that they have power, they have authority, and they know that others can turn to them for leadership and for their strength. 8s expect to be betrayed, they expect to be rejected, and so they don't want to appear vulnerable in any way. But because they have this tough exterior, then they give off the appearance of being able to handle tough things, even when that may not necessarily be true. So all those groups are looking for the validation in some capacity, with the idea that the vast majority of my life I've been rejected in some way. And so I hope it doesn't happen again. Here's what I have to offer instead. So let's try to recap a little bit, because again, the idea is maybe we can triangulate, and I can identify with this thing, and I can identify with this thing, and slowly start to piece together. Hopefully you'll start to hear some of these numbers that are repeating themselves. And that's at least a good starting point. Again, this is still sort of based on behavior, but we try, because I'm so emphatic about it, we try to focus a lot more on motivators and where's your heart, what's driving you to do this. And so these particular triads help in that way. So let's go through a quick little short list. If you weren't completely tracking before, maybe grab a pen, grab a piece of paper, pull it up on your phone, whatever you need to do, and I'll give you a quick little checklist here. So you can ask yourself this question. I tend to make my decisions based on, is it your gut instinct? Is it how things make you feel? Or is it based on logical reasoning? If you make your decisions based on gut instinct, read up more on the 8s, 9s, and 1s. If it's how things make you feel, then you should read more about the 2s, 3s, and 4s. If it's logical reasoning, then look into the 5s, the 6s, and the 7s. Right along with that, this is part of the core intelligences. Maybe ask yourself this question as well. My primary motivator often involves, if it's fear or avoiding fear, look into the 5s, 6s, and 7s. If it's anger or avoiding anger, look at the 8s, 9s, and 1s. If your primary motivator involves shame or avoiding shame, read more into the 2s, 3s, and 4s. So that's the triad that we covered a while ago. We're reinforcing this here. So the next group is the stances. So answer this question. In a crowd of people, I tend to, do you engage or assert yourself? If so, look into the 3s, the 7s, and the 8s. If in a crowd of people you tend to look for familiar faces and try to meet the needs of the people around you, then look into the 1s, the 2s, and the 6s. If in a crowd of people you tend to pull away or withdraw, read more about the 4s, the 5s, and the 9s. Next group, the harmonic group. Ask yourself this question. When there's a problem that arises, I tend to deny or deflect the problem. Look into the 2s, the 7s, and the 9s. If there's a problem that arises and you tend to react and look to other people, then look more into the 4s, the 6s, and the 8s. And if there's a problem that arises and you tend to solve things logically, dig in deeper and try to fix it, then look more at the 1s, the 3s, and the 5s. And then finally, the object relations group, ask yourself this question. When trying to attain something of importance, I regularly, if you expect to fail or be rejected, look more into the 2s, the 5s, and the 8s. If you are regularly frustrated with the result, then look more at the 1s, the 4s, and the 7s. And if you're trying to attain something of importance and you will attach yourself intensely to it, then look more at the 3s, 6s, and 9s. So hopefully you've seen a couple of these numbers pop up multiple times. If you're looking for a good starting point, or like I said, if you've taken a test, you're not really sure how accurate it is, compare it to this. This isn't a foolproof method at all, but it's a much better way of approaching things because we're starting to now dig into the really nitty-gritty, dirty details of who we are under the shell and under the way that we project ourselves to be. Look at those. I'll give you another week to work on that, and I'll see you next week. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. If you like what you heard, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you do your listening. You can even interact with me directly if you go to anchor.fm/One More Thing Podcast. That's the number 1 More Thing Podcast. There you can click on a link to send a voice message. That's a great way to give feedback or let me know if you too would like to be a guest on the show. It's that easy. Special thanks goes out to BigFish_music for providing our theme music and transitions. If you like what you heard, go check him out on Instagram or Facebook. Thanks again for listening to One More Thing Before I Go. Until next time, be good to yourself and be good to others.